The first camera went up on a Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, bolted to the back of the projection booth where the old floodlight used to be. Lorraine Hargrave stood on a stepladder in her father's canvas work jacket, the elbows patched with duct tape, and aimed the lens at the entrance gate. She had purchased 4 cameras total, wireless, $97 apiece from a home security website, $388 plus tax. They recorded to a cloud server, and they also recorded to micro SD cards she kept in a sandwich bag in her glove box. Because Laurie was the kind of woman who believed in a backup for the backup. The property was called the Starlight Drive-In. It sat on 4.2 acres along Old Highway 49 in Alamance County, North Carolina. One screen, 60 feet wide, facing east. A gravel lot permitted for 214 cars. A cinder block projection booth with a roof that leaked. A concession stand that had not served popcorn since 2009. And beyond the lot, on the south side, a stand of loblolly pines that smelled like cold sap and turpentine when the wind came through. Laurie was 58 years old. Her boots were steel-toed Wolverines she had bought at the Tractor Supply in Burlington, and they crunched on the gravel as she moved from post to post, checking angles, adjusting mounts, matching each camera's field of view to the hand-drawn site map on her clipboard. The clipboard was new. The flashlight she carried had a crack in the lens. That contrast told you everything about how she was spending money, which was carefully and on what mattered. The jacket was her father's. Earl Renton had worn it in this booth for 35 years, and the collar still smelled faintly of projection booth dust and Camel cigarettes. She had not washed it since he died. She did not intend to. The sky was low, November overcast, the color of dryer lint, and the air had that particular chill that comes to the Carolina Piedmont when autumn is deciding whether to become winter. A single mockingbird sat on one of the rusted speaker posts at the edge of the lot, watching her with the indifference of something that had been there longer than the theater. From the open door of the old concession stand, a hound lifted its head, brown-muzzled, slow, old in the way that dogs get old when they have stopped pretending otherwise. He watched her too, then set his chin back down on the concrete threshold. Laurie mounted the 4th camera on a pine tree at the south property line, aimed at the back access road, a dirt track that only locals knew about. She checked all 4 feeds on her phone. 4 green lights, 4 live images, cloud synced, SD cards recording. She climbed down from the ladder and stood in the middle of the lot, with her hands in the jacket pockets, looking at the screen that rose against the grey sky, like a blank page waiting for a sentence. She was not rebuilding the Starlight because she loved old movies, though she did. She was not rebuilding it because she needed somewhere to live, though she did need that too. She was rebuilding it because she believed, with the quiet ledger-proven certainty of a woman who had balanced books since she was 14, that the moment it was worth something, he would come for it, and when he did, the cameras would be watching. In 4 months, the Starlight would be open again for the first time in 14 years. In 5 months, Lorraine Hargrave would have the answer to the only question that mattered anymore. Would the man who had taken her home also try to take the one thing her father had left her? But to understand the cameras, you have to understand the kitchen table. March of that year, a Tuesday morning, 8:15, and the particular sound a 34-year marriage makes when it is folded up and put away like a road map nobody needs. The house on Riddle Road was a 3-bedroom ranch on 8/10 of an acre, assessed at $289,000. Laurie had lived there since 1989, the year she married Gary Hargrave. Her name was on the original deed. She had planted the dogwood in the front yard the spring after their wedding, and it had grown taller than the roofline, and she had watched it grow from the kitchen window every morning for 34 years, while she drank her coffee and paid the bills. On Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, at 8:15 in the morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table doing exactly that, paying the water bill online. Her coffee was in a mug that said, "World's Best Grandma," which was a joke because she was not a grandmother. Her sister Patrice had given it to her 2 Christmases ago, and Laurie had kept it because it made her laugh, and because she was not the kind of woman who threw away something that still worked. Gary walked in. He was 61. He was holding a manila envelope. He did not sit down. In 34 years of marriage, every hard conversation they had ever had, the miscarriage in 1996, the time the contracting business almost went under in 2008, the night her father died. Gary had sat down across from her and put both hands flat on the table, as though the table were a raft and he was helping her stay on it. This time he stood. He stood the way a man stands at a counter when he is picking up dry cleaning. He set the envelope beside her coffee and said, "I had Dale draw these up." Dale was Dale Puckett, a local real estate and family law attorney. The envelope contained a petition for divorce and a proposed settlement agreement. The flap was not sealed. It was simply tucked in. He had not even bothered to lick it shut, and she understood, in the time it took her to notice that this had been easy for him. She looked at the envelope, she looked at Gary, she looked at the refrigerator calendar where she had written Dad's birthday, on March 19th, Earl Renton's birthday, which she had marked every year since he died in 2011. She asked, "Since when?" Gary said, "Since a while." She did not pick up the envelope right away. She closed the laptop where she had been paying the water bill. She took a sip of coffee. Then she opened the envelope and read every page of the settlement, slowly, while Gary stood there. The terms were these. Gary gets the house. Laurie gets a cash payout of $40,000 and her personal property. Gary's attorney, Dale Puckett, had prepared the documents and calculated the equity split, $40,000. For half a house assessed at $289,000. Laurie had been balancing books since she was 14 years old. She read documents the way other people read faces, and something in the numbers did not feel right. The equation had a hole in it, but she could not yet name what. Her father had built things. That was the simplest way to say it. Earl Renton had built the concession stand at the Starlight with his own hands in the spring of 1974, and he had built the screen frame out of telephone poles he bought from the power company for $11 each. He had built a business that ran for 35 years, and a reputation as a man who showed up. He died on November 3rd, 2011, in the same recliner where he watched the 11 o'clock news, and the last thing he built was a simple will. The house and the savings went to Laurie's mother, and the Starlight property, the 4.2 acres on Old Highway 49, by then closed for 2 years and overgrown, went to Laurie. She found the first of his index cards later, in a box in the attic. Earl had a habit of writing things down on index cards, the kind you buy in packs of 100 at the drugstore, and tucking them into drawers and toolboxes and shirt pockets like a man leaving himself notes across time. This first one said, in his blocky carpenter's handwriting, "If it's worth keeping, it's worth locking up. And if it's worth locking up, somebody's going to come try the door." Laurie inherited the Starlight free and clear. It was in her name, not Gary's. The lot had sat unused for 12 years. Property taxes were $1,140 a year, which Laurie had paid every January from her own checking account. Gary had never contributed a dollar. He had never asked about the property. He had never offered to help maintain it. He had simply let it sit, the way you let something sit that you do not yet need. Laurie signed the divorce papers 3 weeks later, on April 4th, 2023. She took the $40,000. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store in downtown Graham, North Carolina. Rent, $675 a month. She brought the world's best grandma mug, a box of her father's index cards, and the hound. His name was Duke. He was 9 years old, technically her father's dog, adopted by Earl from the Alamance County shelter 3 years before he died, and inherited by Laurie through the simple fact that no one else offered to take him. 6 months passed. Late September 2023. Laurie was sitting on the floor of her apartment, with Duke beside her, going through the box of Earl's index cards. She had been looking at the Starlight property tax bill, $1,140 due in January, and calculating whether she could afford to do anything with the lot, besides keep paying to let it rot. She found a second card. This one also had a parts number for a simplex projector bulb written on the back, which meant Earl had scribbled it while working in the booth. The front said, "A man who won't fix what's broken in front of him will sure enough come running when he hears somebody else fixed it. She did not decide to reopen the Starlight that night. That came later, and it came in pieces, the way most real decisions do. What she decided that night, sitting on the floor with a dog that was too old to climb onto the couch, and a box of her dead father's handwriting, was something simpler and harder. She decided to find out the truth. Not the truth about whether Gary had loved her. She had stopped needing the answer to that question the morning he did not sit down. The truth about the numbers. The settlement had given her $40,000 for half a house that was worth nearly $300,000, and every time she replayed the math, the equation had a hole in it the size of a man walking out a door. The human contradiction was this: Laurie was deeply competent. She could read a ledger, spot a discrepancy, build a timeline from receipts and dates and cancelled checks. But she also wanted to be wrong. She wanted the math to make sense, because if it didn't, then she was not just left. She was stolen from. And being stolen from by someone you slept beside for 34 years is a different species of grief. She put the index card back in the box, closed the lid, and sat there for 11 minutes before she opened it again. Duke put his chin on her knee. The idea took shape over the following days. If she rebuilt the Starlight, if she turned it into something worth money, and Gary came for it, that would prove the pattern. He takes what she builds, and if she had cameras, records and a lawyer watching, she could catch him. More than that, she could use whatever he did to reopen the divorce settlement and prove the original fraud. She called Nadine Coles the next morning, October the 2nd, 2023. Nadine was 44 years old, a family law and property attorney in Burlington, North Carolina. Small firm, 2 partners. She had handled Laurie's mother's estate in 2019. She was careful, quiet-spoken, and not easily impressed. She was impressed by Laurie's index cards. She told Laurie, "If he files anything on that property, a lien, a claim, a complaint, we let him. We document it, and we let him build the case against himself." Laurie retained Nadine with a $2,500 retainer, paid out of the $40,000. On October 7th, she drove to the Starlight lot after her shift at the Alamance County Public Library, where she worked the circulation desk at $14.50 an hour, 32 hours a week. She inventoried the property. The screen was intact but needed repainting. The projection booth roof leaked. The gravel lot was overgrown with crabgrass. The concession stand was structurally sound. She took 194 photographs on her phone and sent them to Nadine. On October 21st, Nadine confirmed what Laurie already knew. The Starlight property was in Laurie's name only, deeded to her in Earl's 2011 will. Gary had no legal claim. The property had no liens, no encumbrances. It was clean. On November 7th, Laurie installed the cameras. 4 wireless units. Placement: 1 on the rear of the projection booth, aimed at the entrance gate. 1 inside the concession stand window, aimed at the lot. 1 on the screen frame support beam, aimed at the projection booth door. 1 on the pine tree of the south property line, aimed at the back access road. Cloud backup and micro SD cards. She told no one about the cameras, not her co-workers, not her sister in Raleigh. Only Nadine knew. Through November and December, she began the physical restoration. Screen repainting, $640 for paint and a rented lift, and she did it herself over 2 weekends. Projection booth roof, $1,100 hired a roofer from Mebane. Electrical service reconnected, $480 through Piedmont Electric Co-op. Gravel lot cleared and regraded. $2,200 she rented a skid steer and did most of it herself. Hired a neighbor's teenage son named Toby Maddox for 2 Saturdays at $15 an hour. She did not buy a projector yet. She found a used commercial digital unit on a resale site, a Barco DP2K15C, $4,700. She could not afford it yet. On the inside of the projection booth door, taped there by Earl, she found a 3rd index card. It said, "The projector don't care who's watching. It just shows what's there." She read it under the bare bulb of the booth and taped it back where she found it. By the 2nd week of November, the cameras were live, the lot was half cleared, and Lorraine Hargrave had spent $7,820 of the $40,000 she had left in the world. She had a dog that was older than some of the pine trees, a dead father's handwriting in her coat pocket, and 4 wireless cameras pointed at every way in and every way out. She did not know yet what they would record. She only knew that if he came, she would see him. The bait began to ripen in late November. The Starlight sat on Old Highway 49, a 2-lane road that connected Graham to Snow Camp. Anyone driving that road, and Gary's contracting office was 11 miles east on the same highway, could see the 60-foot screen. On November 18th, Laurie rented a 40-foot articulating lift from Sunbelt Rentals in Burlington, $285 a day, and she budgeted 2 days. She primed and painted the screen matte white, using 6 5-gallon buckets of Sherwin-Williams exterior-grade paint, $432 total. She worked from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon both days. The screen faced east, toward the highway, toward town, toward Gary. By sundown on November 19th, the Starlight screen gleamed like a fresh tooth against the pine line. You could see it from a quarter mile away. For 14 years the screen had been a grey slab, rain-streaked and forgotten, the kind of thing your eyes slid past on the way to somewhere else. Now it was white, bright, unapologetic, brand new white. And every truck, every sedan, every school bus that came down Old Highway 49 slowed. Just a little, just for a second, because something that had been dead was moving again. And human beings cannot help but look. While Laurie painted, Duke lay in a patch of sun near the concession stand. He did not move much. She had built him a plywood shelter inside the old concession kitchen and lined it with moving blankets from a U-Haul store, $24. He was too old for the apartment stairs. He lived at the lot now. She came every day. In December she cleared and regraded the lot. She rented a Case SV 185 skid steer, $300 a day for 3 days. Toby Maddox worked 2 Saturdays at $15 an hour, 8 hours each day, $240 total. The lot went from a tangle of crabgrass and broken glass to a clean, level gravel field with visible parking rows. Laurie used orange spray paint to mark them. 214 car spaces, the original capacity Earl had permitted in 1974. She filed a business license application with Alamance County on December 11, 2023. Fee, $75. Business name, Starlight Drive-In Theatre. Sole proprietor, Lorraine Hargrave. This was a public record. Anyone could look it up, she told her sister. On December 14th, Laurie called Patrice in Raleigh and said, "I'm reopening Daddy's Drive-In." Patrice said, "With what money?" Laurie said, "With what I've got." Patrice offered to lend her $3,000. Laurie accepted. Every dollar of that loan was documented. She did not tell Gary. She did not contact him. She did not post about the project on social media. She simply worked, in public, on a property that sat on the road Gary drove every day. Behind a fuse panel in the projection booth, she found another of Earl's index cards. The 4th. It said, "Don't chase the ones who leave. Build something worth coming back to, and see who shows up." She photographed it and texted the photo to Nadine. On Thursday, December 21st, 2023, at 10:07 in the evening, Laurie was in her apartment above the hardware store, eating reheated soup. Her phone buzzed with a motion alert notification from Camera 1, the one on the back of the projection booth, aimed at the entrance gate. She opened the app. The footage was grainy, green-tinged night vision. A pickup truck, dark, extended cab, had pulled off Old Highway 49 and stopped at the Starlight's entrance gate. The gate was a tubular steel farm gate, padlocked. The truck's headlights illuminated the gate, the fresh white screen beyond it, and the orange-painted parking rows. The truck idled for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Then it reversed, pulled back onto the highway, and drove east, toward town, toward Gary's side of the county. Laurie could not read the license plate. The camera's resolution at night, at that distance, did not capture it. But she knew the silhouette of an extended cab truck, and she knew that Gary drove a 2019 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, dark gray extended cab. She did not call anyone. She screenshotted the footage, time-stamped it, and emailed it to Nadine with one line: December 21st, 10:07 p.m. Truck at the gate. Could be anyone. Nadine responded the next morning. Good. Keep the footage. Don't assume. It could have been anyone. A teenager looking for a place to park. A neighbor checking on the noise. A man who remembered the starlight from his childhood and saw the white screen from the road and slowed down the way people slow down near things that used to matter. Laurie told herself all of these things as she sat on the edge of her bed and watched the footage a fourth time. The truck idled for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. In 2 minutes and 14 seconds, you can read a menu, check your mirrors, and make a decision. The truck drove east. Gary lived east. She set her phone on the nightstand, turned off the light, and lay in the dark for a long time. Something her father had written came back to her, as it kept doing in those weeks. If it's worth locking up, somebody's going to come try the door. On Saturday, December 30th, 2023, Laurie was at the Starlight working on the projection booth's wiring. She had hired a licensed electrician named Mike Pratt out of Burlington, $65 an hour, to bring the booth up to code. While Mike worked, Laurie cleaned out the booth, years of dust, old film canisters, mouse nests. In the back corner, under a metal shelving unit, she found a cardboard file box labeled Starlight Taxes Insurance in her father's handwriting. Inside the box were Earl's original property tax receipts from 1974 to 2009. The original deed of trust, filed in 1974, showing Earl Renton as sole owner. A title insurance policy from the same year, and one more thing. A manila envelope. Unsealed, flap tucked in. The echo of Gary's divorce envelope was not lost on her. Inside the envelope was a printout of a property search from the Alamance County Register of Deeds website, dated August 15th, 2022. 7 months before Gary filed for divorce. The printout showed the Starlight property record. Owner, Lorraine E. Hargrave. Deed transfer, 2011. No liens. Someone had searched the property record in August 2022 and printed it out and placed it in Earl's file box in the projection booth. Laurie had not been inside the booth since 2019, when she came to collect some of her father's things after her mother died. Gary, however, had access. Laurie had given him a key to the Starlight's padlock years ago, because he occasionally stored contracting supplies on the lot. She sat on the booth floor with the printout in her hands, and read the date 3 times. August 15th, 2022. 7 months before the manila envelope on the kitchen table. 7 months before he stood up, instead of sitting down. Someone had been looking at this property, her father's property, while she was still married, still paying the water bill, still marking her father's birthday on the refrigerator calendar. She did not confront Gary. She photographed the printout, front and back, and drove it to Nadine's office on Monday, January 2nd, 2024. Nadine looked at the printout for less than 30 seconds before she said, "He was shopping. He was looking at what you owned that he couldn't get in the settlement." She set the printout on her desk, aligned the edges, and added, "Keep building." Laurie drove back to the Starlight that afternoon. She changed the padlock on the gate. She did not give anyone else a key. And the next morning, January 3rd, she found fresh tire tracks in the gravel, inside the gate, past the new lock that entered from the back access road, the dirt track that only locals knew about. On the back of a receipt for popcorn oil, Earl had written another of his index cards, the 5th that Laurie had found. It said, "Watch what a man does when he thinks nobody's counting. That's the man." On January 8th, 2024, at 11:42 in the evening, Hammer 4, the one on the pine tree aimed at the back access road, captured headlights coming down the dirt track. A vehicle entered the lot slowly. The headlights switched off at 11:43 and 9 seconds. The camera's infrared caught what Laurie's adjustments to the angle and sensitivity now allowed it to see clearly. A dark extended cab pickup. It parked behind the concession stand, out of view of the highway. A figure exited the truck. Male, tall, wearing a ball cap and a dark work jacket. He walked the perimeter of the lot for 9 minutes. He stopped at the projection booth and tried the door. Locked. He peered through the window with a phone flashlight. He moved to the screen frame base and examined the footings, the steel supports. He walked to the electrical panel on the east side of the concession stand. He took photographs with his phone. The camera captured the phone's flash 4 times. He returned to the truck and drove back out the dirt track at 11:58. Total time on the property, 16 minutes. Laurie saw the footage the next morning at 6:14. The truck's tailgate had a magnetic sign she recognized. Hargrave Contracting LLC. The removable kind contractors use on personal trucks. She had seen this sign on this truck for 20 years. 16 minutes. He had spent 16 minutes on a property he had no claim to, at an hour when no legitimate visitor arrives, with his headlights off. He had tried the projection booth door. He had photographed the electrical panel. He had walked the footings of the screen the way a contractor walks a site he is evaluating for a bid, or for a lien. Laurie watched the footage standing in her apartment kitchen in the dark, and she felt something settle in her chest like a stone dropping into still water. Not anger, recognition. She called Nadine. Nadine said, "He's building a paper trail for a lien claim. Contractors do it. They document improvements they claim they made, then file a mechanic's lien. If he files one, he can cloud the title and force a sale or a payout." Laurie asked, "Can he do that on a property he never worked on?" Nadine said, "He can file the paperwork. Whether it holds up is a different question, and that's where your cameras come in." Nadine advised Laurie to accelerate the reopening. Make it public. Make it real. Let him commit. Laurie did not confront Gary. She saved the footage. She added a 5th camera, mounted inside the projection booth, and aimed at the door on January 12, 2024. $97. The running total climbed to $8,307 of the original $40,000, plus Patrice's $3,000 loan. On January 19, 2024, at 11:15 in the morning, Laurie was at the Alamance County Public Library, working her circulation desk shift. She was crouched behind the half wall of the desk, shelving returned books on a low cart, when Dale Puckett walked in. She recognized him immediately. Gary's attorney. The man who had drawn up the divorce papers, who had sat across from her in a conference room and pointed to numbers and explained them in a voice as smooth as laminate flooring. He did not see her. He sat down at one of the public-use tables near the periodicals section and took a phone call at normal volume. The library was not busy. 3 other patrons, all in the computer area, 20 feet away. Laurie did not record the call. She was not wearing a wire, and she was not a party to the conversation. But she listened, and the moment Puckett left at 11:28, she wrote down everything she had heard, verbatim, in the back of the yellow legal pad she used for the Starlight's expenses. She dated the notes. January 19th, 2024, 11:15 a.m., Alamance County Public Library. She had heard Puckett talking to Gary. She recognized the cadence, one party giving instructions and the other confirming. The phrases she wrote down were these: "The lien has to reference specific work, dates, dollar amounts. You need to show invoices." And, "The electrical upgrade is the strongest one. You did the panel on Riddle Road, so the template's already there. And, file it before she opens. Once she's operating, it gets complicated with revenue. And, no, she doesn't have to be notified until it's recorded. That's the point." She wrote it all down, pressing so hard the pen scored the next 3 pages. Dates, dollar amounts. The electrical upgrade, the template's already there. File it before she opens. She had been right. Not about an affair. There was no affair, and in some ways that made it worse, because it meant he had not left for someone. He had left for the numbers. He had looked at what she owned and what he could extract, and he had built a plan the way he built a bid. Materials, labor, timeline, margin. From the answering machine cassette she had been listening to at night in her apartment, she remembered a fragment of her father's voice. She had not yet listened to the full message in the booth. But this piece stayed with her. "You'll know the people who love you, sweetheart, Because they're the ones who never count what you cost them. That evening, she drove to Nadine's office with the legal pad. Nadine read the notes. Then Nadine pulled up the Alamance County Register of Deeds website and searched Riddle Road Holdings LLC. She found 2 recorded deeds of trust, refinances on the Riddle Road house, from 2017 and 2020, totaling $112,000 in extracted equity. The LLC's registered agent was Dale Puckett. Nadine looked at the screen for a moment, and then she said, "He didn't just take the house, he hollowed it out first." Laurie sat in Nadine's office with the legal pad on her knees. She was very still. She looked at the deed of trust records on Nadine's screen for a long time. Then she said, "He used to sit down." Nadine waited at the kitchen table. "When something was hard, he used to sit down across from me and put his hands flat on the table." She closed the legal pad. "The last time he stood, like I was a counter, like I was something he was picking up." On January 27th, 2024, at 8:03 in the morning, Nadine called Laurie. He filed it. Gary Hargrave, doing business as Hargrave Contracting LLC, had filed a mechanic's lien against the Starlight Drive-In property, parcel ID 146792, claiming $38,500 in unpaid labor and materials for electrical system upgrade, site grading, and structural assessment, performed between March 2023 and December 2023. The claimed work period overlapped almost exactly with the period after the divorce. The claimed amount, $38,500, was suspiciously close to the $40,000 Laurie had received in the settlement. If the lien was upheld, Laurie would owe Gary nearly everything she got. The lien referenced an electrical panel replacement and upgrade, the same work Puckett had mentioned on the phone at the library. And Gary had not performed any of that work. He had set foot on the property exactly once that the cameras caught. January 8th, 2024, at 11:42 at night, for 16 minutes. The electrician Mike Pratt had performed all electrical work, and Laurie had his invoices. $38,500. She read the number on the lien filing and almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was precise in the way a lie is precise. He had calculated it to the dollar. Take the $40,000 she received in the divorce, subtract $1,500 for the filing fees, and Puckett's cut, and you get $38,500. He was not just claiming money. He was reclaiming the exit payment, penny by penny, as though the divorce settlement had been a loan he was calling in. In the cash register of the concession stand, written in pencil on another of Earl's index cards, the 7th she had found, were these words: "The ones who owe you will always say you owe them. That's how you know." Laurie called Nadine. Nadine said, "Don't respond to the lien. Don't file a motion. Let it sit. I need 30 days to build the fraud case, and I need you to open the theater." Laurie asked why. Nadine explained, if the Starlight opened, generated revenue and became a going concern, and then Gary's lien was exposed as fraudulent, the damages multiplied. He was not just filing a false lien. He was attempting to defraud an operating business. The penalty was sharper, the optics were worse, and a judge would be less sympathetic. Laurie had 30 days. She had $38,500 in fraud on her father's property, a pattern of theft she could now see stretching back 6 years, and a theater she needed to open with the money she had left, and a projector she could not yet afford. She also had 4 cameras, a box of index cards, a dog who slept in the concession stand, and a dead man's voice that kept telling her the same thing in different ways. Build it, watch, and let them come. I want to pause here, because I think you can feel what Laurie felt in that moment. The weight of knowing and the weight of not being finished yet. If this story means something to you, if you have ever watched someone take apart what you built and call it theirs, I would be grateful if you would subscribe. There is more to this, and it gets sharper. She has the footage. She has the notes from the library. She has the lien. Nadine says wait. Would you wait, or would you drive to his house with every piece of evidence in your hands and make him look at it? In late January, while Nadine built the fraud case, the full scope of what Gary had done became visible for the first time. Not because Laurie had suspected this much, but because the documents did not lie, and Nadine was very good at reading them. Nadine subpoenaed the formation documents for Riddle Road Holdings LLC from the North Carolina Secretary of State. The LLC had been formed on April 3, 2017. Registered agent, Dale Puckett. Managing member, Gary T. Hargrave. Lorraine Hargrave was not mentioned anywhere in the filing. The two refinance documents told the rest. The Riddle Road house was refinanced in October 2017. New mortgage, $185,000, up from the original $142,000. It was refinanced again in March 2020. New mortgage, $231,000, extracting $69,000 net of fees. Total extracted, approximately $112,000. Both refinances were processed through the LLC, which held a power of attorney document signed with Laurie's name. Laurie did not sign those documents. She did not know the LLC existed. She did not know the house had been refinanced. When she signed the divorce settlement in April 2023, the house's equity, the number the settlement was based on, had already been gutted. The $40,000 payout was calculated against the depleted value. It was a fraction of a fraction. For 6 years, while Laurie balanced the household checking account and paid the water bill and marked her father's birthday on the refrigerator calendar, Gary had been pulling money out of the house, like a man pulling nails out of a wall. One at a time, carefully so the wall stayed standing until he was ready to walk away. $112,000. She had not known, because the mortgage payments came out of a separate account she had no access to, and because Gary handled the business side. He had always handled the business side, and she had let him. And that, she told Nadine, was the part that made her hands shake. The hole in the equation she had felt on the kitchen table morning now had a name and a dollar amount. Dale Puckett was not just Gary's divorce attorney. He was the architect of the LLC, the registered agent, and the man who prepared the refinance documents. He had sat across from Laurie in a conference room in April and explained the settlement in his smooth voice. He had pointed to the equity number and said, "This is what the house is worth, net of the mortgage." He had not mentioned the LLC. He had not mentioned the two refinances. He had looked her in the eye and lied with numbers, which is the quietest kind of lie there is. On February 4th, 2024, at 2:17 in the morning, Camera 4 captured a vehicle entering the lot from the back access road. This time it was not Gary's Silverado. It was a white utility van with no markings. The van parked behind the projection booth. Two figures exited. One carried what appeared to be a toolbox. They went to the electrical panel on the east side of the concession stand, the same panel Gary had photographed on January 8th. Camera 2, the one in the concession stand window, captured what they did. They opened the panel, which was not locked, and Laurie would curse herself for that later. They disconnected the main breaker and severed 3 of the branch circuit wires with bolt cutters. The work took 7 minutes. They reclosed the panel cover, returned to the van, and left via the back track at 2:31 in the morning. The electrical system Laurie had paid Mike Pratt $480 to reconnect, and which Mike had later upgraded for an additional $1,200 in January, was destroyed. It would cost $2,800 to repair. At 2:17 in the morning, 2 men in a white van drove onto her father's land and cut the wires with bolt cutters. 7 minutes. That is how long it takes to undo 2 months of work and $1,400 in electrical labor. Laurie watched the footage the next morning and counted the seconds the way she counted everything precisely, on the legal pad, in ink. She called Nadine. Nadine said, "Report it to the sheriff. File a vandalism report. Do not mention Gary. Let them investigate." Laurie filed the report with the Alamance County Sheriff's Office on February 5, 2024. Deputy Marcus Vance took the report and viewed the camera footage. He noted the white van and the lack of plates. He filed it as criminal damage to property. He told Laurie, "We'll look into it, but with no plates and no faces, it's going to be hard." The math was getting tight. Laurie had spent $11,107 of her funds. She had $3,000 left from Patrice's loan, and roughly $28,893 remaining from the divorce payout. But $2,800 of that now had to go to re-repair the electrical system. She still needed the projector at $4,700. She was running out of money, and someone was actively sabotaging the property. If she could not open the Starlight, Nadine's legal strategy weakened, and the lien sat on her title like something growing in the dark. That afternoon, Laurie drove to the Starlight. She sat in the concession stand with Duke. Duke put his chin on her boot. She pulled out Earl's answering machine cassette, the one she had been carrying in her jacket pocket for weeks, and held it. She did not play it. Not yet. From Earl's wallet, which Laurie's mother had given her after he died, she had saved one more index card. It said, "They'll try to make you tired. That's the whole play. They'll try to make you tired so you quit before they have to." That night, February 5th, 2024, at 9:14 in the evening, Laurie posted on the Alamance County Community Facebook group, "The Starlight Drive-In is reopening March 1st. First movie free. Bring your families." By midnight, the post had 847 reactions and 213 shares. She had set the final date. The trap had a deadline. She had $38,500 in fraud on her title, a cut electrical system, a projector she could not afford, and a deadline she had just announced to the entire county. Her father would have called that painting yourself into a corner with the door behind you. She called it Tuesday. The sprint to open lasted 23 days. Mike Pratt returned to repair the electrical system and donated half his labor after hearing about the vandalism. Cost to Laurie, $1,400 instead of $2,800. He installed a lock on the electrical panel this time. The projector problem solved itself in the way that problems sometimes do when enough people are watching. Laurie posted on the Starlight's new Facebook page, asking if anyone had a projector. On February 11th, a retired theater manager in Greensboro named Howard Leach responded. He offered to lend her a Christie CP2 220, which he had bought when his theater closed in 2019. He drove it to the Starlight himself in a horse trailer. He refused payment. He said, "Your daddy gave my kids their first movie." 82, I think. Star Trek, Laurie cried. It was the only time in this story that she cried. And then she wiped her face and helped Howard carry the projector into the booth. She cleaned the concession stand and passed the Alamance County Health Department inspection on February 16th. She stocked it with popcorn, candy, and bottled water. Total outlay, $680. The FM transmitter for car radios, a used unit from eBay, cost $220, and Howard helped her calibrate it. Toby Maddox agreed to work the gate and concession on opening night. Patrice drove from Raleigh to help. On February 22nd, 2024, Nadine filed two things. A motion to reopen the divorce settlement, based on newly discovered evidence of fraud, specifically the Riddle Road Holdings, LLC, the two refinances, and the forged power of attorney, and a petition to void the mechanic's lien on the Starlight, supported by Laurie's invoices from Mike Pratt, showing who actually performed the electrical work, the camera footage of Gary's January 8th trespass, Laurie's contemporaneous notes from the library, and the August 2022 property search printout showing pre-divorce reconnaissance. Both filings were served on Gary and Puckett on February 23, 2024, 6 days before opening night. Nadine's calculation was simple. Gary would not quietly accept this. He would do something. Show up, threaten, file a counter motion, or attempt another sabotage. Whatever he did, it would be on camera. Opening night would have not only the 5 existing cameras, but also a 6th, a dash cam in Nadine's car, parked near the gate. Nadine served the papers on a Friday. She told Laurie, "He'll have the weekend to stew. If he's going to do something stupid, it'll be before opening night or during it. Either way, your cameras are rolling." She paused. "And Laurie, don't be alone on the lot after dark until this is over." Laurie said she wouldn't be. She had Duke. Nadine looked at Duke, 11 years old, half deaf, asleep on a moving blanket, and said, "I meant a person." Laurie said, "I know what you meant. On the morning of March 1st, Laurie arrived at the Starlight at 6 in the morning. She swept the lot, tested the projector, filled the popcorn machine, and taped one of her father's index cards to the inside of the ticket window where only she could see it. It said, in Earl's handwriting, "First reel goes up at dark. Everything else is just waiting." She turned on the cameras. All 6. She unlocked the gate. And she waited. Cars began arriving at 6 in the evening. Sunset was at 6:18. By 6:30, the lot had 87 cars. By 7 o'clock, there were 142. People were parked on the grass shoulders of Highway 49. The marquee, which Laurie had hand-lettered herself on the original 1974 reader board, said, "Starlight Drive-In, Reopening Night, The Wizard of Oz, Free Admission." The Wizard of Oz was Earl's favorite film. He had screened it every year on the Starlight's anniversary from 1975 to 2008. The smell of hot popcorn drifted from the concession stand and mixed with the smell of cold grass and exhaust and pine sap from the tree line. Headlights swept the screen as cars parked, and kids sat on car hoods wrapped in blankets. And the FM transmitter crackled to life on 89.3. Duke lay on a folded horse blanket beside the projection booth door, watching the lot with his milky eyes, his ears half-cocked at the hum of voices. The movie started at 7:12. Dorothy landed in Oz. The screen was 60 feet wide and blazing. The sound came through 142 car radios, a soft symphony of the same dialogue slightly out of sync, washing across the gravel lot like a choir that had not rehearsed together, but knew the song by heart. At 7:34, Gary Hargrave's Silverado pulled into the lot. He did not use the back access road this time. He came through the front gate, which was open. He parked at the edge of the lot, near the projection booth. He was alone. Camera 1 captured him parking. Camera 3 on the screen frame captured him getting out. Camera 5 inside the projection booth captured what happened next, because Gary walked directly to the booth and opened the door. Laurie was inside. She was standing at the projector, monitoring the film. She turned when the door opened. He stood in the frame, tall, broad, wearing the same jacket the January footage had captured, and for a moment he looked at her the way he had looked at the electrical panel, assessing, calculating, measuring the load. "You got the papers," he said. It was not a question. She said, "You're on my property, Gary." He said, "I built half of what's here." She said, and the camera recorded her voice, steady, unhurried, the voice of a woman who had spent 4 months watching and counting. "You built nothing here. My father built it. Mike Pratt repaired it. I paid for it. And you know that because you photographed the panel at 11:42 on January 8th, and your truck had the Hargrave Contracting sign on the tailgate." Gary went still. He did not know about the cameras. He had assumed the one at the gate was general security. He did not know there were 6, did not know they had captured his truck, his face, his movements. His mouth opened and closed. He said, "That property search was public record." Laurie said, "The lien isn't." He took a step forward. Camera 5 recorded it. Toby Maddox, who had been standing just outside the booth door, stepped inside and said, "Everything okay, Miss Laurie?" Gary looked at Toby, looked at the camera mounted above the door, looked at Laurie. He turned and walked out. He got in his truck. He did not drive to the exit. He drove toward the back access road and found Nadine's car parked across it, dashcam running, with Nadine sitting in the driver's seat, window down, phone in her hand, recording. Gary stopped. He sat in his truck for 41 seconds. On the Starlight screen, Dorothy was singing "Over the Rainbow" for the second time, the reprise near the end, the one where she means it. On camera 4, Gary Hargraves sat in his truck and stared at the tail lights of Nadine Coles's Subaru, and in those 41 seconds, Laurie believed, he understood that the test was over and that he had failed it. He reversed, drove to the front gate, and left. After Gary left, Laurie stayed in the projection booth. The movie played. The lot was full. Toby brought her a bag of popcorn she did not eat. She sat down in Earl's projectionist chair, a wooden swivel chair with the arms worn smooth, and took the microcassette from her jacket pocket. She had listened to this cassette many times, but tonight she listened to it in the booth where it had been recorded. Earl's outgoing message on the Starlight's business line answering machine, recorded in 1997, the year Laurie's mother got sick, and Earl thought he might have to sell. She pressed play. "You've reached the Starlight Drive-In on Old Highway 49. We're closed for the season, but we'll be back in the spring. This is Earl. If you're calling about the property, it's not for sale. If you're calling about the movies, we'll have the new schedule up in March. And if this is Laurie, sweetheart, I know you're worried. But the things people try to take from you are the things that tell you what you've got. The screen's still standing. I'll fix the rest. Leave a message after the beep." The projector hummed. On the screen, 60 feet high, the credits rolled. In the lot, 142 cars sat in the dark with their radios on, and the sound of applause, actual genuine applause from open car windows, drifted through the booth walls like something her father might have heard 30 years ago. Duke lifted his head. Laurie pressed stop, put the cassette back in her pocket and stood up. She had a second showing to run. There was no shouting in the courtroom on March 15, 2024. There was no movie-style vindication speech. Judge Patricia Sykes, Alamance County District Court, heard Nadine's motion to reopen the divorce settlement. Nadine presented the Riddle Road Holdings LLC documents, the refinance records, the forged power of attorney whose signature a handwriting analyst had confirmed was not a match to Laurie's, the Starlight camera footage, Laurie's contemporaneous library notes, and the January 27th lien filing. Gary's attorney, a new one, not Puckett, who had recused himself, requested a continuance. The judge denied it. On April 2nd, 2024, Judge Sykes ruled. The divorce settlement was reopened. The mechanic's lien on the Starlight was voided as fraudulent. Gary was ordered to pay restitution of $112,000. The extracted equity, plus $38,500. The fraudulent lien amount, plus Laurie's attorney fees. The court referred the matter to the Alamance County District Attorney for possible criminal charges against Gary and Puckett for fraud, forgery, and filing a false lien. In August of 2024, Gary Hargrave pleaded no contest to one count of filing a fraudulent lien, a Class 1 felony in North Carolina, and one count of obtaining property by false pretense. He received 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and a civil judgment that would follow him for a decade. Dale Puckett's law license was suspended pending a state bar investigation. Judge Sykes read the ruling in a flat, administrative voice, the way you read the weather. Gary sat at the defense table and looked at the surface of it the way Laurie had once looked at the kitchen table. And she understood, from across the courtroom, from the other side of everything, that he was finally counting what it cost. Laurie did not speak to Gary after the hearing. She walked to her car, where Duke was waiting in the back seat, with the windows cracked. She drove to the Starlight. By March 1st, 2025, the Starlight Drive-In had been open for 12 months. It operated Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights from April through October. In its first full season, it grossed $67,400. Not a fortune, but enough to cover operating costs, property taxes, a regular wage for Toby Maddox at $12 an hour, and the beginning of a savings fund for a permanent projector. Howard Leach donated the Christie outright in June of 2024, after visiting the Starlight on a Saturday night and seeing 193 cars in the lot. He said, "Your daddy would have called this a good house." Laurie still worked at the library on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. She had not quit. She liked the quiet. She had moved out of the apartment above the hardware store and into a small house she rented on Elm Street, in Graham, $850 a month. She could afford it now. Patrice visited once a month and ran the concession stand on those weekends. She had stopped asking, with what money? The $112,000 restitution judgment was being paid in installments. Laurie had received $14,000 so far. She had put every dollar into the Starlight. The Alamance County School District screened a movie for the senior class in May. The Graham Rotary Club held a monthly fundraiser night. A local farmer named Cecil Parsons built a wooden sign for the entrance. Starlight Drive-In, Est. 1974. Reopened 2024. He did not charge for it. It was not a big theatre. It was not a profitable theatre, not in the way a person with a spreadsheet and a plan would have built it. It was a 4-acre gravel lot, with one screen and a donated projector, and a popcorn machine that jammed if you did not hit it in exactly the right spot on the left side. It was also, on a Friday night in July, the place where 206 cars full of people who knew each other's names sat in the dark and watched something together, and there is no spreadsheet that measures what that is worth. Duke died in September, in his bed in the concession stand, on a morning warm enough to leave the door open. She buried him under the pine tree at the south end of the lot, where the camera had watched the back road all winter long. On March 1st, 2025, the Starlight held its 1-year anniversary. The movie was The Wizard of Oz. Again, she would always screen it on March 1st. Laurie stood at the projection booth window, looking out at the lot. The screen was lit. The cars were parked. The FM signal was live. She was wearing Earl's jacket. It was still too big. The elbows were still patched with duct tape. The collar still smelled more faintly every year of projection booth dust and Camel cigarettes. She reached into the jacket pocket and found an index card she had missed. Either she had never reached deep enough into the lining, or Earl had tucked it into a seam where it would only be found by someone who wore the jacket long enough and hard enough to find every pocket. It said, in Earl's handwriting, "Laurie, if you're reading this, you found the jacket, which means you needed it. I'm sorry I can't be there. Show them something good tonight." She read it once. She folded it back into the pocket. She started the projector. The projector caught, the way it always does, with a stutter and a hum. And then the screen filled with light. 60 feet of it, bright enough to see from the highway, bright enough to see from anywhere that mattered. She left the booth door open. The sound of the movie came in from 109 car radios, each one a half-second off from the next, and it sounded the way a room full of people singing the same song sounds. Imperfect, and therefore true. She stood in her father's jacket, with her hands in the pockets, and watched the screen do what it had always done. What Earl Renton had built it to do 40 years ago, on a 4-acre lot at the edge of a town that did not know it needed a drive-in until it had one. It showed what was there.